From the dawn of time, religions from every corner of the globe have practiced the dark ritual of human sacrifice. We'll be looking at how and why each religion performed this gruesome act, seeing the lengths that people went to in order to please their deity. Carthage. One of the greatest and most spectacular cities in the ancient world, was also home to what is considered some of the most horrific and brutal human sacrifices. Behind the wealth and glamour of its bustling streets, the practice of infant sacrificial killing was widespread. What was thought by many historians to be Greek and Roman propaganda was proven to be true when a mass grave of 20,000 infants was discovered in Carthage. The most bizarre mystery, however, was the Carthaginians appeared to have loved their children before the sacrifice. Like many cultures, it was most likely seen as a gift to the infant. Most disturbingly, however, it was common for the people to purchase babies off poorer citizens for sacrifice. Some historians believe that the brutal form of sacrifice was a way to control the population of the city, as well as a religious practice. Roman historians believed that underneath a great bronze statue of their god, there was a large fire pit where the infants were thrown into it. Why the Carthaginians chose infants over adults is a mystery that we are likely to never know. In ancient Hawaii, at a sacred temple, the local islanders gathered to offer a human sacrifice to their war god Ku. They believed that by sacrificing people, they could gain favor and achieve victory in their battles. The slave class, descendants of war captives or lawbreakers, were brought to the holy place and hung upside down. A priest would collect their sweat, and then they would be beaten mercilessly until their flesh was smooth. Finally, the sacrifice would be disemboweled, and their flesh would be either cooked or eaten raw by the priest and the chief of the tribe. Similar practices were used by the neighboring Fijians, who had a similar form of sacrifice. When a woman's husband died, she would be bathed and dressed in her finest ornaments. The people would then strangle the woman and bury her with her husband. This was seen to be merciful. The Fijians believed that when they reached the afterlife, a god who hated widows would condemn them to eternal torture if they were found to be by themselves. Of course, no list about human sacrifice would be complete without the Aztecs. By far the most prolific takers of human life for religious purposes, their entire world revolved around sacrifice. They believed that their very gods sacrificed themselves to allow the world to exist. In fact, the Aztecs believed that sacrifice was necessary to keep the sun shining. During the Spanish conquest, when an Aztec priest was faced with the choice of abandoning the practice of sacrifice or death for him and his people, he chose death. The sheer magnitude of Aztec sacrifice pales in comparison to any modern tragedy. It was said that during the consecration of the Great Pyramid in 1487, 80,000 people were sacrificed over 4 days. The most common sacrifice would require the person to walk up the temple stairs to meet their fate. Once at the top, the priest would open up their stomach, cutting them from their throat to their belly, pulling out the beating heart. All the while, the blood would pour down the pyramid. It was believed that the heart was the home of the soul and a fragment of the sun. The second, and perhaps the most eerie, ancient China. The victim would be buried, and in some instances, encased alive. This was practiced on a grand scale. At certain points in Chinese history, thousands of people were buried in a single year. It appears the sacrificed girls were more fortunate than their male counterparts, as they were simply buried alive. Others were not so lucky. Young children and babies appeared to have suffered the most violent deaths, their bodies placed underneath newly constructed buildings. Young men were disemboweled and then buried with their possessions. Famously, during the construction of the Great Wall, thousands of people were said to have been buried in the wall, leading some to call it the world's longest graveyard. While the amount of people sacrificed by the Celts is controversial, it is fair to say that compared to other cultures, there were a lot. All of their ancient stone structures, and the mystical settings they worshipped in, leads us to wonder what they did in their spare time. The infamous Druids were known to gather in a holy place with a person and stab them in the back. Based off the victim's death spasms, they would prophesize about the future. The Celts were also famous for their great burning wicker men. According to the Romans, the Celts would construct an enormous human-like figure out of wood and straw. In a euphoric craze, the Celts would throw in cattle, with animals, and all sorts of living things. Eventually, humans would be pushed or attached to the burning man to die themselves. As gruesome as each of the sacrifices were, What they shared in common is the people had a purpose. Whether they sought glory and good fortune, or were simply trying to prevent harm from coming to their own people, due to superstitions, they thought they were doing their part. No matter how brutal, there was always a reason, and true evil didn't seem to play a part. Or so we think.